People laughed at the plan at first. The move sounded wild, and it seemed like a joke. 1 month later, all of that changed. We are yet to know what happened after. The outcome surprised many who mocked the first action. But here's the thing, those bees weren't just released, they were practically abandoned in one of the harshest environments on Earth. No shade, no nectar, no nearby water. Everyone expected a collapse. But instead something far stranger began to happen. What could possibly survive under those odds? The release workers arrived early and set down trailers on the ground. They unloaded wooden boxes that held bee frames. They lifted their lids, rolled back cloth covers, and placed the boxes on some stands. The sound of wings rose as bees clustered at entrances and began to fly. Some boxes were not placed in the shade, while others were covered. They then put lots of water for the bees in big drums and set out buckets and poured sugar syrup. Beekeepers always have to be cautious when moving many hives, and there are procedures they have to follow, such as including covered transport, making planned stops, and taking rest. In this case, they did not follow the procedures. Frames were exposed, queen cages handled in the open air, and boxes left while foragers flew away. Open hives in heat push bees to search for water and food quickly. Desert plants do not produce enough nectar and pollen. Forager bees circled low to search for flowers and moisture. Beekeepers of that area said the nearest reliable water was quite far. When water is scarce, worker bees spend more time flying and less time collecting nectar, which weakens the colony. The temperature in the desert is always low. We all know that heat changes how a hive behaves. Bees bring water to cool the interior and fan with their wings to move air. Brood needs stable warmth to develop. When a colony cannot cool itself, the brood suffers, and queens may reduce egg laying. Keepers later reported brood that looked thin and spotty, a sign that feeding was not enough for the young. Handling many colonies together raises risks. Close boxes let workers drift between hives. Strong colonies steal food from the weak, which spreads pests and disease. Experienced beekeepers space hives and offer them security. At the site, many boxes shared the same small area without barriers, so movement between boxes was higher than normal. Predators and scavengers noticed. Ants reached the syrup, beetles found exposed frames, and birds hovered near the stands. Workers cleaned frames on site, but comb repair and brood care take a long time. When weak hives lose stores, they need time and a lot of food to rebuild. Beekeepers arrived to help. They carried water tanks from nearby yards and set out shaded covers. Volunteers learnt to pour syrup at a safe distance and to set water points away from walking paths to avoid having bees gather near people's homes. Keepers inspected queen status, inspected the stores, and checked for mites. The inspection was to help determine which colonies could be saved on site and which needed to be combined or moved. The choice to place many hives in a bare space had immediate effects. Worker bees left in search of water and food. Queens slowed their laying. Weak colonies lost momentum. The whole activity had setbacks. The trucks had carried the hives for many hours before arrival. Hives looked like they had been on the road. Some boxes showed light wear from travel. Queen cages were sometimes unmarked. Frames in several boxes had little capped honey and a thin layer of stores. That suggested colonies had not fed well during transportation. Crew members later said they shifted boxes and checked on the queens quickly after opening the lids. Those checks helped, but could not replace the type of care and attention they needed. But the early inspections only scratched the surface. Hidden inside the boxes was a bigger story, one that no quick fix could solve. Were these bees already too far gone before they even arrived at the site? Immediate reaction. At first, many people treated the event as a strange stunt. Neighbors laughed and could not stop talking about it. The laughter did not last long after a serious problem was reported by beekeeping professionals who went to the site. Skilled keepers looked at hives and saw stressed colonies. They cited low stores on frames and queens that appeared to slow egg laying. The experienced beekeepers brought more water tanks, shade cloth, and sugar syrup. These hands-on responses followed the needed guidelines, which are providing water, reducing heat, and feeding weak colonies. Volunteers learnt to place water points away from footpaths so bees did not crowd human activity. The people who came to help measured the frames, checked the brood, and marked boxes needing repair. Their work aimed to stabilize colonies so they could be moved or treated later. The Nevada Department of Agriculture and the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension issued a public statement. State staff outlined basic safety steps and reminded owners to register apiary locations. Extension staff gave practical advice on feeding and checking for parasites. Officials urged caution near the site and advised people who suffer from allergic reactions to seek medical help. Medical staff and emergency responders monitored the area. Clinics warned residents to avoid the immediate site if they had severe allergies to bee stings. Local emergency services posted guidance about keeping doors and windows shut and about having antihistamines or epinephrine available for known allergic individuals. The presence of many bees near the roads and homes raised public safety concerns that required coordination between agricultural officials and health services. Farmers and orchard owners followed the updates closely. Many crops depend on reliable pollination at certain periods of the year. Agricultural operations began to assess how a sudden loss or weakness in nearby honeybee colonies might affect contracts and crop yields. Some farm operators contacted pollination contractors to confirm hive counts and to protect planned pollination events. Concern over the future availability of healthy colonies created early discussion about backup plans. Business owners adjusted operations. Roadside cafes moved outdoor seating indoors. Lodging offices warned guests to stay clear of certain trails. Small shops changed delivery points to avoid areas where bees clustered. Community groups organized quickly. Beekeeping clubs and farmers set up schedules to take turns at the site. They checked which boxes needed immediate attention and which required longer care. The rotation reduced fatigue among them and kept measures consistent. Farmers were trained to feed syrup without creating robbing situations and to spot signs of mite infestation that require lab testing. Reports of pest pressure reached experienced keepers. When many colonies gather, stress levels rise, and pests like Varroa destructor can spread faster. Keepers sampled mite levels by testing fallen mite counts and using standard checks on frames. Those tests guided treatment choices and decisions about which colonies to combine. The goal was to limit the spread while restoring colony strength where possible. Public records searches followed. Reporters and residents asked state offices for transport records and permits. People wanted to know who authorized moving so many hives and whether proper notifications were filed. Where transport manifests and registration details were not clear, investigators could trace responsibility. Economic concerns surfaced as maintenance costs rose. Fuel, replacement frames, medication for pests, and labor all added to recovery bills. Some small keepers struggled to pay immediate expenses and sought help from larger operations or community funds. Larger commercial beekeepers calculated potential revenue loss if many colonies required weeks of recovery or if pollination contracts could not be met. The public mood shifted from mockery to a focus on logistics and loss. Conversations moved from jokes to questions about who was responsible, what records exist, and how many colonies could survive. People who had laughed at first now monitored the site updates closely. The combined response of volunteers, keepers, state staff, farmers, and health workers created a coordinated effort to limit harm and to document the event for later review. Insurers and contract holders entered the picture. Some beekeepers filed claims for lost colonies and damaged equipment. Contract language about delivery and the condition of hives became central in talks between farmers and providers. County agricultural offices began collecting statements and evidence to support any claims. Lab reports on disease and parasite levels were scheduled so insurers and regulators could assess losses. The added paperwork increased pressure on small keepers who needed time and outside help. But as the paperwork piled up and officials combed through reports, one question hung heavy in the air: what if the real damage wouldn't show until weeks later?